and welcome to the Common Creative Podcast. My name is Chris Meredith.
And my name is Paul Fairweather.
And you probably know by now, we're on a mission to unlock the secrets of creativity through the lenses of ideas, stories, and pictures. And we have a fascinating author from South Africa as our guest today.
Jillian Reilly, as you say, she's American from South Africa, and she's written a book called The 10 Permissions, which is going to be out in September. And she was very keen to talk to us. And we're very keen to talk to her because, it's really, I suppose we have put the tagline underneath permission to be creative. But it's a very cheeky approach.
Yes, I think a lot of our guests dance around this subject of how do you navigate life now the rules have changed? And the idea of kind of working your way up the corporate ladder seems to have gone out the window. But if that's not what you do, what do you do? I think particularly about Nigel Marsh, for example, whose book Fat, Fine and 40 was all about kind of life stages and career changes. But Michelle Cox, who's going to be published shortly, has gone from a corporate executive to somebody with a plural income as a charity chair, as a coach, as a podcaster, and so on. So Gillian has had her go at writing. How do you navigate this crazy new world that's emerging out there? And that's expressed through her book, The 10 Permissions. I thought it was very exciting.
Yeah, look, I really liked the conversation, which you'll hear in a minute, because, there are some paradoxes there, but it's really, it's about being yourself without being a selfish, egoistic pain in the ass, So, I think it's wonderful. Let's get her in.
All right, little tip would be listening. There's a quote. She says it's about what I am versus what I can. And I think that's a real key to unlocking how she sees the world. Yes, let's get her in.
Gillian, welcome to the Common Creative Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Gillian, great to meet you online. Very excited to hear about your book and more.
Yeah.
So, Gillian,
Excited to share more.
Yeah, so you're our first person from South Africa on the show, although you told us you are American and still identify as American. Can you just give us a quick 30 to 60 second potted history about how you came to be living in South Africa for the last 30 odd years? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sure. I was bright-eyed in 1990, bright-eyed 23-year-old wanting to go out and save the world. And South Africa was going through this massive transition to end apartheid and become the new South Africa. And I sort of wanted to be witness to and part of this massive experiment in social change. And so got myself over here with every intention of leaving in 6 months, and then said, to hell with that. This is far more interesting than anything I'm going to do in Chicago. And ended up staying, and that sort of started what I would say is a lifetime's work in helping people navigate pretty profound change, whether that was at a social level. So here in South Africa, I ended up working all across the African continent, most notably probably in Zimbabwe during their HIV/AIDS epidemic. Moved on to do work around organizational change, individual change. But I would say that the thread sort of pulling through all of it was, how do we evolve and grow and adapt, either because we want to, because we see the need for us to, to behave differently, to do different things in a different time, or because we have to, because the world is changing around us and we need to figure out how to keep up. And so, yeah, a lifetime spent sort of in human behavior change, and very curious about how to help that happen as sort of smoothly and quickly as it can.
Now, I'm going to dive straight into your book. It's called The 10 Permissions, and it's about the rules of adulting in the 20th century. And I guess the obvious first question is, why do we need, surely adults, it's the kids that need the help, the support, the guidance, or why do adults need to understand what adulting is all about? Surely we've got it lined up. We know what we're doing, don't we?
Do we? Not so yes. I'm not so sure we do. And obviously that is the point of the book. I think, I just talked about helping people navigate profound change. And I think the reality is that we are living through truly extraordinary change at the moment, where the playing field for life is shifting underneath our feet, where a lot of our expectations for how we're supposed to behave, what we're allowed to do, are changing because the world is so very volatile. So a lot of what we were told about how to navigate life, which was essentially, put your head down, get a good degree, get a good job, find a nice partner. Those are not, paying off for people in the way that they used to. And the basic premise is that we need a new operating system if we're going to thrive in a chaotic world. And while I think we know that on some level, and while I think we are adapting to it out of many times under duress, I think we could be far more intentional about it. And so that's the book is sort of saying, hey, give yourself permission to really intentionally update your own perspective on how you're allowed to navigate adult life today.
And I love the way that it's expressed is about giving yourself permission.
Mhm.
And I wonder what's preventing people at the moment, because when the talk is everyone's all so self-centered now, and we're all doing too much of what we want, we should think more about the kind of the world at large. And you're saying there's always something in the way of us giving ourselves permission to kind of operate with this new operating system. So why can't we do it instinctively?
Well, I think we're all deeply imprinted with what I sort of describe in the book as this sort of 20th century operating model, which worked very well in a very linear, predictable world. So, we still sort of believe that our career paths should be largely linear, that we will be rewarded for loyalty and hard work, that the strategies, the career strategies, the life strategies that worked for previous generations should, to some extent, largely work for us, even when we look around and see that quite patently they're not. So as I said, I think we are adapting to some extent, but there's still hesitancy. There's still this sort of, is this okay? Am I allowed? And what I'm saying in the book is it's time to push well beyond that. Yeah, yes, we are allowed. Yes, we actually have to. And we need to kind of remove the shame, the worry, the anxiety around my life doesn't look the way I expected it to. I don't have what I thought I was going to have by this time, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really much more of an intentional, explicit update to say, I actually have to operate differently today. And I'm more than allowed. I'm required to, and that's okay.
So, Gillian, is the impetus for the book your own personal experience, or is it observations in other people? Like we had a fellow, James Victoria, on the show, and he wrote a book called Perfection. And he said to us, I wrote this book for myself. And he said, I honestly, like, these are the things I'm very good at coaching other people, but I wrote this book for myself to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing because I don't do it. Is it a book, for yourself, or is it observations and frustrations that you've seen other people go through, a combination of both?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. I mean, I will certainly say that as a 50-something-year-old woman, the idea that I'm launching a book, that I'm moving into, a new chapter in my life is probably not where I expect it to be. It's delightful and I'm very happy to be here, but I'm engaging with self-permission all the time. Like, it's okay. You're not disappearing into obscurity simply because you are the age that you are. So yeah, that's an ongoing conversation that I have as a professional. I'm having it with myself as a parent, trying to raise 2 teenage sons and often feeling like I'm, kind of trying to come up with advice for them, a playbook to hand them. So I dedicate the book to them because I think it's their world. As you said, Chris, I think they're the ones who probably need it the most. And then, yeah, the theme of permission came out of all of that work that I described to you at the beginning of the conversation, of seeing people having to make new choices, wanting to make new choices, but somehow being so gripped by fear of rejection, of disapproval, of irrelevance that they don't allow themselves to go there. So yeah, it is both very personal and very much a product of my career.
A lovely story from an author called Charles Handy. He was a professor at London Business School and started his career with the oil company Shell as a little bright young graduate. And they assessed him and predicted his career. And they said that after your 60 years of working with us, you will retire and you'll be the managing director of one of these divisions that we run. That's our prediction for you. And he obviously left to become a professor. And he said, the interesting thing is the division that I was supposed to be managing director of doesn't exist anymore. In fact, the company that he originally joined, it wasn't Shell, it was a subsidiary, doesn't exist anymore. And then the country that he would have been placed in doesn't exist anymore. It's impossible to have these. So I'm agreeing with you that the idea of this sort of linear career where you work hard and get rewarded and work your way up some kind of ladder just doesn't make sense anymore. No. So yes, we all need a new operating system.
Yeah, and I started to write the book during COVID when I think it was becoming clear. But I mean, right at this precise moment, the inability to know, the inability to have 5-year plans has probably never felt more pertinent. So yeah, I think it's only accelerating and getting more real for us on a sort of daily basis.
Gillian, I just wanted to ask you about that. When we started, you're talking about the fact that, you went there to witness great change. And in your book, chapter 6 is forget about the future. And you just started talking about that, sort of saying, that seems a little bit of a paradox. Why are we changing if we don't want a better future?
Yeah.
So what sort of take do you have in terms of the book around forget the future?
Well, it was obviously a lot of these permissions are very cheeky, intentional nudges to kind of rethink how you're operating. And that one in particular was, around what, again, I describe as a 20th century operating model where you envisioned a desired future and you worked backwards, much in the way you're kind of describing the Shell guy. Here's your beautiful future. Now just work your way there. And that is obviously premised on the idea that you know what that looks like, that from where you're sitting, you can see it so clearly that you can create a path there. And I think there's no better example of why that hasn't worked than a lot of the big social change experiments like this one, where nobody could imagine what a South Africa in 20 years, 10 years is going to look like. So the nudge in the book is to move away from that sort of deductive, I decide what my desired future is and then work my way towards that, to something more inductive, where I have a general idea and what I describe is to have an intention, a direction as opposed to a destination. And then I work my way there, ready to discover along the way where I might be wrong, where new information is coming my way. So, obviously the whole premise is that we operate in a far more adaptive, inductive way in order to take full advantage of the possibility that we can't even make sense of from where we're sitting. So, sometimes what I talk about is how perhaps the biggest and most ambitious futures are built from the smallest steps forward, where you're willing to not know, where you're willing to find your way and discover, as opposed to assuming that you know what good looks like from where you're sitting.
And just on that, I see that your last chapter is make believe.
Yes.
You're sort of going to let's just pretend for a bit, where we're, just.
Well, again, that's a playful way of what I say is make things you believe in and believe that you can make things. I think what is most necessary right now is that belief in our power to be generative, to create new solutions to old problems, to come at our work with that sort of exploratory mindset where we believe that we can create new things. And I think that for a lot of people, as you guys will know far better than I do, feels again like, am I allowed? Am I allowed to actually believe that I am a creative force? Because what previous generations were raised to believe was that they were workers. They weren't creators. They didn't build things. They executed on other people's visions. And I think what's happening now is the potential for all of us to kind of reclaim a little bit of that creative force that sits in each of us, which I think is the purpose of your podcast.
Yes, it is.
To decide how we do create those better futures. But that's a perfect example of something where lots of self-permission is required there, because you will feel all sorts of anxiety around showing up in that creative spirit, as opposed to tell me what to do and I'll do it for you. So it's a very different mindset, again, as you know, and I think it's more necessary than ever.
For what it's worth, Gillian, I blame the Victorians as the industrial era, when it was about lining people up in rows, do the same thing again and again, mass production and so on, and we've moved on from that. Some of the themes in your book are remarkably consistent with themes we've heard from other people we've spoken to. And what I find fascinating about that is that we've spoken to business people, Australia, US, with this sort of angle of creativity and with a very different set of data, observations, a very different context. You've emerged at some very familiar themes, which I think is very exciting. So my question is, can you talk us through some moments when you thought, heck, there's something going on here about, let's say, make believe or forget about the future? One or more of your 10 permissions. What have you observed that led you to these, let's call it a rule or a guideline for navigating adulthood?
Yeah, I think it's, again, sort of decades spent in, let me just bring it more recently, in organizations, watching people navigating careers, navigating change within their own lives, within the systems that they were working in, and kind of more often than not coming up against these same walls of, am I allowed? Am I allowed to bring my best ideas? Am I allowed to bring my most authentic voice and my contributions? And there was this tension between what was emerging socially, which I describe in the book as an unraveling of hierarchies are flattening, individual identity is more important than ever. And on the one hand, that is happening and we're all living through it. But you walk into a lot of professional contexts, you work with a lot of professionals trying to bring about change in their own lives, and you're still very constrained by, this very old imprint of who they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to show up. So, I describe the book as being a reflection of a lot of failures at helping people bring about change either within their own institutions or organizations, their own lives, their own communities, where, the story is so holding them in place that all of their own sort of desires get squashed. So, I think it's also my own journey of my own life, which is, to find myself always sort of working against a story and becoming increasingly aware of it as I got older, of particularly when I became a mom and particularly when I became a parent, that all of a sudden I felt the story kind of descend on me of, well, this is how you're supposed to behave and this is what your life is going to look like now. And I think I personally felt a very strong kind of sense of, not today, not my life. And then you get in conversation with people in midlife, in menopause, a subject we're all talking about right now, and you realize that the need and the desire for reinvention and conscious adaptation is often still squashed by a social constructs around who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to behave.
You just talked about becoming a mum, and I'm assuming, you're no different to us over here. My kids are teenagers, and we've been helicopter parents, and they certainly don't have a lot of freedom. I'm interested to know, again, probably another play, but your chapter "Look for Trouble," because
Yes, I did.
and we were saying earlier that this isn't a book for kids, and certainly I don't say to my kids, go out and look for trouble.
Right.
Although I do tell them to look for problems to solve.
Yeah.
So yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think, as I describe in the book, I say go looking for a teacher, not a fight. I think we have raised a generation of kids to be high achievers, to believe that if they could achieve their way through all the volatility. And in the process, I think we force a degree of compliance and a degree of conformity. We squash out a lot of conscience in terms of their own role in this world and their own way of dealing with some of the troubles. They're expected to have these incredibly tidy CVs and to carve these quite smooth paths. And in that space, there's no room for them to get into trouble, i.e. make mistakes, fall off, get back up again, or go after things that are troublesome, to have opinions, to perhaps take somebody on. Don't do that. That's not looked upon nicely. So, I think when I've been in some of the hardest conversations, when I've dealt with some of the most difficult things that nobody else wanted to deal with, is when I've learned the most and when I've figured out what matters to me. And I think we need to give young people and even ourselves more space to, go after things that appear troublesome and not worry about how it will stain us or char us or make us look difficult, but rather embrace the fact that it's in those spaces that we kind of are molded and shaped to decide, what matters to us. And I don't think there's ever been a time when that's felt, again, more relevant than now.
So I'd love you to share a tip. I mean, a lot of people that listen in are in big corporations, and I started my career in big companies, and I tried to get promoted and work my way up the ladder. So in my mind's eye, there's a lot of people who are working very hard, who've got to a point where they've got a certain amount of success financially, perhaps, but perhaps not in job security because everything's being restructured the same amount. Just wondering where it all leads and what it does. What's something that somebody like that can do where the temptation would be to perhaps get in a bit earlier, leave a bit later, and sort of grab more strongly to that framework that they've been working within?
Mm.
You come in with this book saying it's all about permission. It's all about give yourself permission to find trouble, to think small, whatever it may be. But how can they start? How do you start a journey like that?
No, it's a great question. And I'm actually talking to young people and to, young adults quite a lot about this. And I think, the first permission is be willful, which, is almost the thing that gets squashed earliest. In an effort to be a good boy or girl, we often lose sight of what it is that we want, and we are unable to identify it, much less articulate it. And so we go looking for what we want from a set of ready-made options outside of us. Now, those ready-made options are disappearing, and we're having to make our own options more and more. So I would say from the beginning, begin to engage with your own self around desire, not for what do I want to be when I grow up, but what do I want to do now? And most importantly, what do I want to learn now? What do I want to create now? What are some of the problems and issues that I want to be a part of solving or helping to create alternatives to? So having that desire and then building out what I talk about in the book, which is a very common topic these days, a portfolio, a sort of diverse range of skills, of capabilities, of networks that allow you not to get sort of hemmed in by this, narrow linear mindset that the only option is to keep moving forward. But what I would describe as strategic diversification of what you're able to do, who you know, how you apply it. And lastly, I would say, I talk in the book about a sort of I can versus I am mindset. So decoupling your identity from whatever the role that you have initially is, and rather seeing yourself as being capable of doing things. So, not I am an accountant and I shall be one for the rest of my life, but I have learned accounting and now I'm setting out to figure out how do I best apply that and use that and deploy that in an ever-changing world. A lot of it is about mindset, I think, and your expectation and understanding that you are sort of navigating in a more nimble and adaptive way as opposed to plug into a system and hope it's going to look after me for the rest of my days.
Gillian, I'm very interested. You sort of explained part of what my next question is, but there seems to be this thing that, like be willful, yet, we acknowledge that we live in a very individualist society. So it really is what you're sort of saying is more of being an intentional individual, so it's just not me plowing through, the crowds. It's what if being also like certainly going for what I want, but being very aware of what effect I'm having on the world and the others as I go.
Yeah.
The sort of risk. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think because it's not only to me, not only because that's more desirable, because I can make my best contributions that way. Right. I mean, it's not about being demanding by being willful. It's about being clear about what my offer is and what I want to contribute to, and then finding the right fit for other people who want to do that, much in the way that you two came together to co-create something. When I know what it is that I want or who I am, I'm in a far better place to go out and find other people to co-create with. And I think the requirement in the changing marketplace of work and career in the world is going to be that I'm going out to find where I can co-create, where I can find the right fit, as opposed to fitting into a big institution that will then take care of me. I'm going to be required to go out and make my best offer to others, to the world. And I can only do that when I know what it is that I want to do, what it is that I'm best at creating. So yeah, that intentionality, I think, doesn't only lead to a more satisfied self, but it leads to me being a better partner and contributor with other people.
Jillian, I'd love to know about your personal story moving from the US to South Africa. You mentioned the University of Chicago, and you kind of saw some of the changes going on in South Africa and thought, I've got to be part of this. Yeah. And the reason I'd love to hear the story is because, forgive the generalization, but Americans are notoriously cautious about the outside world. Everything happens
Yeah.
in the States. Everything good that exists is in the States, and there's no need to engage with other countries. They don't have much to offer. And you went, no, there's a lot of excitement out there. Why didn't you stay home and let South Africa do their thing? What led you to say, I'm going to leave this country? You're talking, by the way, to a British person that's come to Australia. So I've made an international move myself.
Yeah.
But what was it that for you that led you there and then led you to stay?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the line you just uttered was the exact thing I think my father had said at the time. Why can't you just stay here and do all of these, the same things that you want to? There's people that need help here too. Yeah, Dad, I get it. I know. So I guess I always had an interest in and a desire to see the world and to experience other cultures and other places. And you're 100% correct. I was the only person in my family with a passport. So I was from the outset I made no sense to anyone around me. I was driven by something, and this is something that I talk to young people about quite a lot, which is that some of your most important desires will not come with an elevator pitch, right? They are not things that you can neatly articulate or make anybody else buy into. The fact that I had it within me at the time to acknowledge and act on those desires, I'm very grateful for, because it goes without saying that I confused and disappointed a lot of people. I was supposed to go to law school. I was supposed to have a very neat and tidy Midwestern life, but there was something about the world that was calling me. There was something about this place, this very troubled place, that was calling me. And yeah, I was willing to act on it. And it took a very long time for me to make myself knowable to the people around me. And one of the lines in the book is that sometimes when other people don't know you is when you're getting to know yourself. It's very much acting on that inner voice, which I think more and more we have to listen to, and trusting it not to necessarily lead you to success or to the best place, but just following that curiosity to the next best place and being willing to learn there and adapt from that place.
So, Chris, I could answer that question for Gillian based on the chapters of her book. She was very willful.
There we go.
Her father thought she went astray. She took on outside the States to watch an amazing experiment. And once she got there, she felt away. She forgot about her future back in America. She was actually thinking small, but thinking big. She traveled light, and she was really looking for trouble.
Yeah.
You got it. You worked it out, Paul. You worked it all out.
I was certainly this idea of a rebel. I reject, or I don't accept anyway, what I've been handed down, and I'm going to do things my own way.
Gillian, just unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. If you could, your book will be out in September. So I don't know, have you got a pre-order or something on Amazon, or is it not that far advanced?
Thank you, Paul.
Well, we'll put those links in the in your show note.
I will say for Australian listeners, it's not yet up on Amazon Australia, but it will be. So it is on Amazon US but it is coming up there soon.
Look, so just to sign off, have you got, one more gem, one thing, to the adults here thinking, this is not for me, or just in terms of permission, what's one little step that people could take to give themselves permission?
Yeah, well, I think I want to pick up on your last point, Chris, about being rebellious. And I think that that's what we often feel when we don't follow convention, that we're a rebel and that that's bad and that's not what we wanted to be. And I'd like us to kind of reframe that a little bit for this day and age, where it's not about being rebellious, it's about being strategic. Following your own path is not some sort of finger in the face to what's always been. It's an investment in finding out where you want to go. So I think we need to lose some of that deeply imprinted sort of, oh my gosh, I'll be seen as a rebel, and actually say, as I say in the book, it's not about F you. It's yay me. It's yay me. I'm to go out and figure out how I make my best contribution to a world that's calling for our best contribution. So, we don't need to be afraid of being rebellious. What we do need to be is bold enough to be strategic in a world that wants us to step out into it. So, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you guys. Thank you so much.
Great to speak to you, Gillian. I love that idea. Yay me. It's not an act of rebellion. It's an act of celebration of you. And what an empowering, exciting message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, I really what I love, with our guests, how articulate they are. And Gillian particularly, sort of some complex ideas, and she's so articulate, and her use of words and language really sort of breaks through. We threw a few paradoxes at her, and she was so articulate in the way that she unpacked them and explained them, and I don't like that word, I like that word. And very, very articulate. So I'm really hopeful her book will do well.
Yes, and I think it will, because there's real power in what she's saying. I love these slightly, what would you say, provocative 10 permissions. Go astray, look for trouble, forget about the future. And when you scratch the surface and ask her about them, it makes sense. You look for trouble means look for a problem that needs solving. And you think, yeah, that makes sense to me. Make believe, I think, is a reference to you have to believe in yourself. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Very articulate, and there's some real kind of intensity and thoughtfulness about these 10 permissions. And the big one she said many times, am I allowed? And I think she's saying, don't ask yourself that question. The answer is yes. What you have to do is get on with it.
Yeah. And so, look, as Chris mentioned, coming up in the future is Michelle Cox, which we actually did record on the same day, and they do fit together.
Dovetail.
They dovetail together. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow us.
Please tell your friends. Please give us a rating. Please buy Gillian's book, The 10 Permissions. But tell your friends. We're getting, I think, more and more excited about the ideas and about the trouble that we're trying to solve, getting the world more creative, more empowered, and so on. Tell your friends. Spread the word about the Common Creative Podcast.
And tune in next week.
See you next week.